For this episode on Zoo Tours, once again thanks to the filming efforts of an anonymous viewer and YouTube's own The Zoo Experience, you and I get to go back to the Netherlands for another walkthrough of the Royal Burger Zoo. This time, all of our attention will be turned towards their Rimba attraction. Rimba is relatively new compared to other sections of the park. It opened in 2008 to coincide a celebration of the zoo's 95th anniversary, with Princess Margriet of the Netherlands in attendance to inaugurate this realm. Now, if you don't speak the language, chances are you're probably wondering, what on earth is a Rimba? Rimba translates to jungle in Malay. So if that's any indication of what you'll see today, this 2-hectare region is dedicated to the cold and the warm-blooded, the common and the rare, from the flora and the trees of Southeast Asia. As per the new usual, before we begin our walkthrough, I want to see if all of you can identify this species that will appear in the next episode. I looked back on zoochat.com, the perfect site for zoo nerds, to see the initial thoughts and first comments on Rimba when it opened, and the biggest critique was that it wasn't lush enough. And now, I've said this before, but this is why you shouldn't hold high expectations for new projects. You gotta wait for things to settle and let the green grow, because there's a good chance it will one day look as intended like this. I don't entirely know what the standards are in Europe. I think they're a little more strict than they are where I'm from, but right off the bat, I think the first exhibit is extraordinary. It's large, lush, the animals can climb high in the air, and I have to admit that if this were in the US, this would easily be the best of its kind for two species. A binturong, or what myself and a few refer to as a bearcat, that unfortunately did not show. But they're actually mixed with sun bears. And to make things even better, you can see into their indoor quarters when colder months roll around. A setup that very few zoos in America have, but apparently it's a pretty common thing to see in other parts of the world. You know how people go nuts over pandas, but I like to think that it's the sun bears that should be getting all that kind of attention. They're the smallest of the bear species, yet they have one of the world's longest tongues by body ratio, at 25 centimeters. They use it to forage for insects and honey in hard-to-reach places. So if some of you are wondering why don't they attack the bearcats, well, they're naturally not on their menu. In the last episode, I mentioned that Rimba features species that are disappearing from US zoos, and the sun bear is one of them. At least 16 parks in Europe display them, versus 9 AZA facilities that are across the pond. I know those numbers aren't too far off, but sun bears are being phased out of the US, while places like Burgers are continuing their efforts to breed this adorable honey bear. The next enclosure is the largest of the Rimba, and one of the largest in the entire zoo. The animals here are separated from us by an 8.5 meter wide water moat, so our view is completely unobstructed and offers a very wide panoramic view of a mix that I didn't even think was possible in managed care. This one space supports 6 different species, and 4 of the 6, and this will be the last time I say this, I promise, but I'm just trying to stay relevant for most of my viewers. 4 of the 6 are incredibly rare in the United States. 2 I have never actually seen with my own eyes, and you're about to learn something about all of them. Patrolling the trees, the ropes, and the vines are Siamangs, the largest kind of gibbon and the largest kind of lesser ape. They're easy to tell apart among the other species of gibbons by its shaggy fur, longer arms, and an inflatable throat pouch that helps them amplify their booming calls, which can be heard from 2 miles away. The smallest critter on the ground, if you don't count the wild moorhens, is a Reeve's Muntjac, a species of deer that's native to China and was introduced to the UK. Then we have something I dream of seeing one day, the Indian hog deer. They're a little taller than a Muntjac, but noticeably heavier and a little bit more on the stubby side. But the shorter legs means they can run and duck under obstacles instead of having to leap over them. They're native to many parts of South and Southeast Asia, but there are free-roaming populations in Australia and the United States. Unlike many deer that prefer the safety of the forest, Eld's deer thrive in a mix of grasslands, wetlands, and marshlands. Males grow a thicker, darker coat during the mating season, which makes them almost look like a completely different species. They're also referred to as the brow-antlered deer because the first tine, or branch of their antlers, grows forward over their face where you'd expect eyebrows to be. And Rimba's biggest beast is the Javan Banteng, a critically endangered species of wild cow. At the shoulder, they can be about 1.5 meters and weigh up to 600 kilograms. Their herd size can range from just 2 to 40 members that are usually led by a single mature bull. And if you want to be able to point out who that is, males are usually taller, more muscular, have longer horns, and have darker coats. The Bantengs and everyone else in here has the privilege of dealing with antics from the pig-tailed macaques. I love when animals have names where I don't have to explain how they got their name. In my research, I couldn't find the natural advantage of having such a fun-looking tail, but several sources did mention that they spend a great deal of their time on the ground and might not need such a long tail to help them balance on branches like you would find on a monkey that spends a majority of their lives in trees. Alright, that's it. There are no more animals to talk about in that exhibit. We can move on to a cave tunnel that stretches about 50 meters long, and it's settled underneath the Banteng & Co. display. But speaking of long, in this cave dwells 2 reptiles that are impossible to miss because they are among some of the largest species in their families. The first one has 2 spaces that can be combined to be 1. And here you will find the Asian water monitor, which is widely recognized as the second biggest lizard after the Komodo dragon. They like to spend their time sunbathing in trees above the water, so if it senses danger, it can escape and plunge into the river and even stay underwater for 30 minutes. They're also typically about 1.5 meters in length, but their friends around the corner dwarfs them by about 5 meters. So I need to give props to the Burger Zoo for actually giving their reticulated python enough space to stretch out and show off their entire true length and still have room to spare, versus every single python display I've ever personally seen that aren't even half this size. The trail then puts us back out into the jungle, only to lead us to another shelter once more, but rather than taking us underground, you'll find yourself level with the canopy overlooking the forest. What looks like a very large curved flight cage that goes so far back you don't even notice right away that the space is fully enclosed. And it's home to what I want to say is another zoo tour's first, or almost is. Another gibbon, but this one is known by several names. They look like white-cheeked gibbons, but these are yellow-cheeked gibbons. You can also call them red-cheeked, buff-cheeked, or as the zoo calls them, golden-cheeked. And you'll notice that they come in different colors. Unlike the Siamang, where both males and females have black fur. Adult yellow-cheek males always have dark fur. Adult females are always blonde, but their babies are always born blonde. And after 1 year, their fur turns black, but if they're a female, once again, their fur will eventually go back to being blonde. And our last spectacular species is the mightiest of the Rimba. It could take down nearly every animal, not just in the region, but in the entire zoo. And it's also the smallest of its kind, the Sumatran Tiger. The smallest of the tigers, but in my heart, the most gorgeous, because of its extra long tufts on the side of their face and the reddish tone of their fur. Their jungle in burgers, as you might expect by now, is on par in quality with everything we've seen so far. You can try to find the cats in all that green, but you are given plenty of opportunities. Our viewing area follows almost the entire length of their enclosure, from up here to the den, and 4 other glass panels that brings you directly face to face. The foliage doesn't quite hide all of the fencing just yet, but it makes sense considering the barriers are so much taller for extra precaution, and it's not like it matters anyway, but I bring it up because the back netting is directly adjacent to the mixed species paddock. I'm sure there might be some kind of hot wire involved, And there's a slope so the primates and the hoofstock can't actually touch the fence, but other than that, there's no trickery or illusion involved. There really is just one single obstacle stopping the cats from going on the hunt. Like nearly every creature that calls Rimba home, Sumatran tigers and their other striped friends are staring extinction right in the face. Well, you'll notice that there are a few signs on the trail with this symbol. Burgers is one of the many zoos that financially supports Vietnamazing, which is a conservation campaign launched by the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and so far as early as 2025, 200,000 euros have been collected to raise awareness for lesser-known endangered species and their struggles. It also supports scientific research, funds other conservation projects like Save Vietnam's Wildlife, and connects zoos with field programs that are in Vietnam. Next on Zoo Tours, the channel members put it to a vote, and it wasn't even close. They want all of us to explore the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens' newest big thing, and one of the nation's greatest elephant facilities, with the side of support from an elephant's loudest, most beautiful, and most adorable friends. So, as always, please stay tuned for our next adventure, stay wild, and thank you all for watching Zoo Tours.